welcome to International Forum. Our topic today is healthcare in America. In the upcoming election, presidential election in 2008, healthcare is the top, #1 most important domestic issue to Americans. I'm pleased to welcome back today to our program Uwe Reinhardt, the international renowned health economist and health policy expert, to help us think through some of the issues with our much troubled healthcare system. Professor Reinhardt is the James Madison Professor of Political Economy and Professor of Economics at Princeton University. Welcome back.
My pleasure.
Uwe, may I call you Uwe?
Thank you.
I have just come back from a trip to Germany where I had the opportunity to look at the German health reform up close. I was amazed, very surprised to see that one of the big issues that they tried to solve in the latest round of health reform was the issue of the so-called uninsured Germans. Altogether, Germany has 200,000 people who are uninsured in a population of 82 million, so that is about 0.2% of their population. And you know what? They solved the problem. So by comparison, in America, we have 47 million, is that right?
47 million, about 16% of the population.
Without health insurance. So my first question to you is there a light at the end of the tunnel for America's uninsured?
I don't think there is. 5 years from now, we might get it down to 40 million, but I don't think Americans actually want to solve this problem. And one reason
But we're rich. We're a rich country.
That's just it. It's really not an issue of money at all. It's an issue of ideology. And Americans don't have a consensus on the moral values that they would want their health system to follow. You may have noticed in Germany, or if you go to the UK, or if you go to Taiwan, these people have a consensus about the ethics that their health system should obey. We do not in America. A classic case is children. We have this big wrestling match in Washington where the Congress, the Democratic Congress, passed a bill to extend health insurance to more children. And the president vetoed it. He wanted to basically not really extend the insurance coverage at all. And he said he did so, quite honestly he said it, on ideological grounds. And the reason is Americans, unlike Europeans, have not really agreed on what the role of a child in society is. Europeans tend to look at children as national treasures, the future of the country, and the state's responsibility. So therefore, it is natural to a European to assume that the state should finance health care for the children, or should assure that every child has proper health insurance and proper health care. In America, there are many Americans who think that way too, but there are just as many Americans who think of children more like human pets who are the responsibility of their owners. You have the child, you're responsible. That's not how Europeans think. So the ideological battle in America over S-chip is really, are children human pets, or are they the responsibility of the state because they are a national treasure? That's what the fight is about. It's actually not about money.
So you don't at all see the two sides coming together anytime soon?
The two sides have been fighting as long as I've been in this country, for decades, and they have not come together. They have come further apart. The arguments are far more shrill, far more nasty than they used to be, and I don't think we will come together, not in a few years. There is that joke that somebody died, went to heaven, and asked God, will America ever have universal health insurance? And God said, yes, there will, but not in my lifetime. So that's how I view it.
What does it cost to cover the 47 million uninsured? I just heard a number yesterday, 110 billion a year. I mean, when you compare this to the cost of war in Iraq, we've spent so far about 600 billion. Is that about right? In Iraq, and that would mean that, you know, with that money, we could have covered the uninsured for almost 6 years.
I think a good rule of thumb, if you want to think about it, you could have universal coverage in America for half a year Iraq. That's the equation. Half a year's of financing the Iraq occupation equals universal coverage for America. So that's why I say it can't be about money, because that's not in a GDP of 14 trillion. That's not anything that could do any harm to America. It is really over ideological issues. We can't even agree on children, let alone adults.
Our system also is the most expensive in the world. We spend by far the most money on healthcare. Is it now over 16% GDP?
It is over 16%.
And on a per person basis, what do we spend?
$7,000 per capita. And Canadians spend roughly half as much in purchasing power parity, half as much.
Half as much.
But have universal coverage. Although not always the high technology we have, and for some technology you queue up in Canada. You have to admit that too.
But why is it so expensive? Michael Moore would say that it's the private health insurance system in America. Is it?
Well, I mean, he picks on it as the fall guy. I would go broader than that. This system was constructed to give the supply side, the hospitals, the doctor, the pharma companies, more market power than the demand side, which is very splintered into thousands of little insurance companies and bigger ones. But they don't have much market power. While if you go to the other countries, like Canada or Germany, you find much more market power given to the demand side, to the buyers, patients and insurers, and less to the suppliers. And so this was a decision made not by the American people. I don't think the American people have as much say over their destiny as we are taught in high school. It was made by the elite who decided that having a system where the supply side gets more power, the doctors and hospitals, gives you nirvana in healthcare, the latest technology, luxury, all of this stuff that we like, and therefore you cannot change it.
Does that explain why prices are so high in healthcare services in America?
Yes, for everything, Americans pay far higher prices than Europeans or Canadians or Taiwanese would for the same thing. Whether it's an MRI or a doctor visit, you name it, we pay often twice as much.
Many people ask the question, can we afford this very high-cost healthcare system? Or can we afford continue to afford this current rate of spending growth in healthcare?
And here the answer is classic economics, yes and no, on the one hand, on the other.
Yes?
The yes part is healthcare is part of the gross domestic product, which we all worship. That is really our God, GDP per capita. And so healthcare is part of it, and if you can't manufacture cameras or computers, you got to do something. And one thing we are good at is healthcare. So it's a valuable product that does not constitute a drag. Yes, we could afford it. What is problematic is that in America, close to half of all healthcare is financed through public budgets. And in their wisdom, state governments, federal government, and sometimes municipalities, but less so. But it's mainly the states and the federal government.
You're talking about the Medicaid and Medicare
Medicaid,
programs.
Medicare, and then, of course, for the military and the Veterans Administration. That adds up to close to 50%. And that goes through government budgets, which are constrained by the voter. Americans have, in general, never raised the percent of GDP they allocated to the federal government, around 18, 19%. And overall, it's something like 28%. And when you then use most of that budget for health care, you will have less for education, less for roads, less for public health, avoiding epidemics. And then you can say, this is dangerous. If you chew up a given fixed budget for one item, then you don't have enough to educate, for instance, all the immigrant children the smartest thing to do would in fact be to educate them, not to send them back, because we're short of bodies in America. The smart thing to do would be to educate these kids, but we don't have the money.
Talk a little bit about your famous rule, the Reinhardt rule, that healthcare spending usually far exceeds our growth in GDP, and that so some point down the road we may not be able to afford healthcare the way it's run. Is that true? Explain that.
Well, I wouldn't call it the Reinhardt rule. Any good health economist knows this, that in the last 40 years, the growth of health spending in America has exceeded the growth of the entire gross domestic product by 2.5 percentage points. It's called the 2.5% rule.
So in other words, you're saying that if GDP growth is, say, 4% a year,
healthcare spending will grow 6.5%.
Okay.
And it's a rule that's sort of held, not year to year, but in the long run. If you extend that, which the government actuaries, they use that rule, we will be spending 20%, 1/5 of the GDP on healthcare by the year 2015. If you then extend it to 2050, we'll be spending 38, close to 40% of the GDP. And that doesn't seem likely. If you go to 2100, it'll be close to 80%. I always sort of kid, we'll have king-size beds from coast to coast made by the Japanese, 2 Americans with MD degrees in it giving each other checkups, and that's the GDP. So we're not going to do this. Something will have to break within the next 20 years.
Are we getting our money's worth for the health care that we get, for those of us fortunate enough to get health care?
The assessment of economists is that overall, healthcare creates enormous value in terms of added life and added quality of life, because in the end, that's what people care more about than having a nice car or a flat screen television, is their health, their mobility, and to be able to enjoy life. And in terms of added value, quality adjusted life years, healthcare has been unbelievably value yielding on average. Now, that doesn't mean that at the fringes we don't finance an enormous amount of waste. We do in healthcare, that's well known. Of course, we do in the military too. We produce tanks so heavy that can't go over bridges. Yeah. I mean, there's all this nonsense there. And in education, we have a lot of waste too, even at Princeton University, I could point out waste. So the healthcare has its share of waste. But overall, it's one of the most wonderful sectors of the American economy.
Well, all right, but I dug up some facts here, which I'd like to get your views on them. The United Kingdom, for example, it's a single-payer country. Many Americans think that that's socialized medicine, and these long waiting lines is not something Americans want. But in the UK, people are judged healthier than the Americans. This is according to a paper published in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine earlier this year. When you look at their health spending, they spend 8.3% GDP, and we spend over 16% of GDP. And on a per-person basis, England spends $2,724, and we spend, you just said, $7,000. Yeah. So that's fact number one. Fact number two: there's a Commonwealth Fund, a nonpartisan think tank in New York. They have a 6-country study that concluded that despite having the most costly health system in the world, the United States consistently underperforms on 5 out of the 6 dimensions of performance relative to other countries. And these dimensions are quality, access, efficiency, equity, and healthy lives. And there's more. Another group, the National Women's Law Center, came out with a study just in October 2007 that says that the state of women's health is poor nationwide. And infant mortality remains unchanged since 3 years ago, 2004. And black women have higher rates of breast cancer than all the other races combined. And number of uninsured women is going up, and percent of women who are obese increased in all 50 states. Your comment.
And we have, not only did the infant mortality rate not changed, but we have one of the highest, more babies die in America than in Canada or England. According to the CIA fact book, I guess they checked out their facts, our infant mortality rate is on par with Cuba's. So actually slightly lower, but who knows whether the Cubans report this, honestly. But the issue is this. The health system alone isn't totally responsible for the health status of people. So the British health system, I think, for the money they spend, is far more efficient than ours. Less luxurious, to be sure. They spend more on primary care, catching stuff early, less on tertiary care. But
and that makes a difference in the health status of the population.
That could make. But the other thing is, the American economy is one that visits endless insecurity on people. People here are extremely insecure and stressed. They don't have health insurance. They lose it with their job. They can get structured and thrown out of work anytime the company gets merged. Living in a highly competitive society such as ours, performance-geared, is so stressful that even the kids are binge drinking. I mean, why do college kids binge drink? And the answer is they're stressed beyond belief from the competition. If you constantly throw people into such a competitive environment, we produce a lot of GDP, but a lot of stress and with it ill health. So a policy people think much of the fact that we are less healthy in the US than Canadians are, although they spend only half as much, cannot be blamed on the health system. Partly, yes, maybe some of it, but the bulk of it is lifestyle, and part of that has to do with the stress of American life. It is not really a tranquil life. It's rough.
As I listened to you, I just remembered something. It's been said that health is only about 10% healthcare, but the 90% other factors, like lifestyle, like your socioeconomic status, like whether you have clean air, clean water, good housing.
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing you may have noticed when you went to Germany, did you find a whole lot of obese people walking in the street?
I must say no,
you
I do not.
Right? You simply do. Of course not in Asia, but I myself surprised when I go there.
But it's happening too, and they may just be behind.
They're behind, but we are the leaders in that, and that is due to fast food. They have fewer fast food outlets over there. Here in every corner we have it. And then you have it by income class. High-income Americans generally tend to be slender too. Part of the problem of obesity is that very often low-income people have two jobs. They don't have time to cook. They send their kids, give them money to eat at McDonald's. So there have been many studies, usually by sociologists, that say part of the obesity problem isn't even sloppiness, that people are just careless. It's just simply that's part of this competitive hard working. We are the hardest working people in the industrialized world other than, I believe, Japan. But I think in terms of hours worked per year, no one in Europe can rival us. They work about 30% less per year and take 6 weeks vacation, all weekend off. Try to call someone in Germany on Friday after 4 o'clock. Forget it. You can't reach them. And that creates health.
I was in Finland last year, and I was told that by our Finnish friends that the Finns take their after work hours very seriously. So
as only the Finns would.
Yeah, and their vacations very seriously, and everybody gets multiple weeks of vacation a year.
Yeah, the Finns are famous for tango dancing, which they take deadly seriously.
How do other countries control healthcare cost?
Other countries, as I mentioned earlier, give the demand side, the insurance side, more power. For instance, take Germany, where you just were. There, all the insurance companies, they have 200 small sickness funds, non-profit funds. But in a state, they all join in one association that negotiates with all the doctors who also have an association together over the fees. So the demand side has as much power as the supply side. Well, in the U.S., that's really not how it's done. Hospitals particularly band together in large units, in systems, and then go to an insurance company and say, if you don't have us in your contract with your insured, you cannot sell policies. So therefore, vis-a-vis a hospital system, an insurance company, even a big one, has no power. And therefore, the hospital can shove down prices down their throat.
The role of the government in these other countries, is the government more powerful? Is there more regulation, like they regulate fees? And
they have two things going. The government unabashedly regulates the entire health system because that's the only way you get the ethical direction that the system is supposed to have. The free markets are not ethical. They may be whatever they do, but they cannot obey ethics. In a free market, poor people are the losers and rich people get everything. I mean, that's how markets work. Therefore, they say we cannot use free markets other than under strict regulation, which is what Germany, under this reform, is actually doing. They will have competition, but under tight government regulation. And this is what ultimately you need. The latest proposal from the Committee of Economic Development, developed with the help of Alan Enthoven, a good friend, is basically, again, to have tightly regulated competition, more on the German model, but one shall see. What is the problem here? Well, first of all, Americans grow up to hate their government. That's really not true in other countries. And secondly, you cannot buy politicians retail in other countries. You have parliamentary system, and campaign financing, as we know it, is unknown. You cannot purchase the goodwill of an individual congressman
as we do here.
As we do here.
Yeah.
You know, here you buy the hearts and minds of senators and congressmen retail.
One by one.
One by one. You can't do that there. And these congressmen, their goodwill is bought by the supply side.
What about the question or problem that the healthcare system, the providers, doctors and hospitals, they really so far have not been held accountable for what they do. The doctors and hospitals get paid for whatever services they render, regardless of what happens, the outcomes. Yeah. But recently I've seen data about European countries. They're beginning to look at this thing called cost effectiveness. In other words, if I as insurer buy something from you, the doctor and hospitals, I want to know that it is cost effective, it's worth my money.
Right.
And if it's not, they're now talking about getting the money back from the providers. Is that true? Is that happening? And also, do you see that coming to America?
Well, yes. I mean, cost effectiveness, saying we'll pay for this only if the value we get is worth the expenditure, is still anathema. If you mention that here, they think you're from the devil. But I give physicians in this country about 10 more years of this freewheeling style, because think about the setup we have. We have a hospital, like Princeton Hospital here, which is a free workshop for the doctors. They're affiliated. They don't own it. They're not employed. They go in there. They can tell a nurse, do this, do that, do that. In other words, they can cause the hospitals to have cost, but they're not accountable. They don't work there.
They don't care, nor do they know about the hospital's budget.
They don't know anything about this. So there is research. I happen to be the chair of the New Jersey Commission on Rationalizing New Jersey Healthcare, and I had a friend, Jack Wenberg, run off some numbers, say, how much does it cost in the last 2 years of life of Medicare patients in different New Jersey hospitals? If you go to the north, near Newark and further north, it costs Medicare spends 3 times as much per elderly in the last 2 years of life than they do in the southern part of New Jersey. And when you ask, why is this? Did the quality of life of these species, is their DNA different up there? No, they say it's just physicians. It's whatever they're like. Up there, physicians keep patients longer and bill more and order more services. They have no accountability. Well, I would have news coming. As I say, I give them less than 10 years, and they will be held by name accountable for the public resources they conscript in the treating of patients. unless they show, yes, I spend more, but I also get better results, they will not be able to get away with it. The period of sort of unaccountable freewheeling healthcare for physicians is over in America.
Going forward, I'd like to talk with you about health reforms. Talk about two aspects of reform. One, what do you think are the most important reforms that we as a nation need? Secondly, what's politically and socially feasible, doable, achievable?
I'm glad you frame it this way, because they're totally different questions. I believe what you need is basically universal coverage. It seems to me ridiculous to expect doctors and hospitals to give care to patients without getting paid for that. So you need that. You need universal coverage. Secondly, you need a better reimbursement system. In this state, Medicaid pays a pediatrician $30 to look after a poor child, but the same legislator pay $100 for their own children. This is nonsense, unless they really are willing to say, the New Jersey legislators, what they signal. They say a poor child is worth less than a rich child. That's what they're signaling. And the doctors accept it in the sense that they refuse to treat Medicaid kids. This kind of hypocrisy is wrong. When you say all people are created equal, but for a kid from Trenton, I pay you only $30 to see it, and for my own kid, I pay you $100, you are not thinking that all people are created equal. So I would challenge New Jersey legislators to say, what is it you really want? Do you believe all people are created equal? Do you think at least all children should be treated equally? Then pay up. And if you don't want to pay up, then confess that you do not hold to this lovely maxim that we're all created equal. That's the first. So we need universal coverage. We need to get control of quality. Quality in America is not what it should be. It's in other countries the same, but for the money we spend, we should have better quality. And you probably know these numbers better than I do even. And part of that is to engage electronic information technology to hold people accountable and to make healthcare more efficient. Those are the three things we really need: IT, quality, and universal coverage.
And what are achievable of the three?
Universal coverage is not achievable because we cannot even agree what a child is, so forget that one. But we can all agree we want better quality. We want to reduce the chance of getting killed in American hospitals. And the IOM says now, every year, up to 100,000 people die from avoidable mistakes. Every rich, poor, Republican, Democrat wants that down. I mean, we all have the desire not to die in a hospital. So therefore, that can be done. The IT, again, is not Republican or Democratic. We can get that done. We will get this done within the next. But universal coverage is ideological, it is partisan, and we will not get it done.
Our time is just about up. Before you go, any parting thoughts for fellow Americans as they prepare themselves to vote in the 2008 presidential election?
The first, I would say, when a politician, say, I won't mention names here, when he comes and writes off someone's health proposal as socialized medicine, get angry at that saying and say, you insulting my intellect. Tell me what is wrong specifically with that. Don't give me cliches, number one. Secondly, be honest with themselves. What is it you want from your health system? Would you like us to be all treated equally? Then pay up equally. If not, be honest about it. So that's the two things.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. Always, it's a great pleasure having you on our program. Uwe Reinhardt, Professor, Princeton University. I'm Mei Chang for International Forum. Thank you for watching and see you next time.